In response to U.S. regulations, China, feeling its pride wounded, has continually retaliated. This is the current U.S.-China tension. Recently, the U.S. blacklisted around 40 Chinese companies for allegedly supporting Russia's military. China now faces a significant challenge as it deals with an opponent of a different league, intensifying the discord between the two nations. But it's not just about the U.S. China seems to confront every global issue with a tit-for-tat approach. Due to these confrontations, China has faced many diplomatic disputes, tarnishing its image internationally. Still, China doesn't seem to back down. Why? Deep-rooted within the Chinese psyche is a culture of revenge. There's a saying in China about exhuming a corpse to whip it. Though macabre, it encapsulates a revenge story that the Chinese hold dear. The tale revolves around Wu Zishu from the spring and autumn period. Originally from the state of Chu, Wu Zishu fled to the rival state of Wu to avenge the death of his father and brother at the hands of the Chu king. Rising to prominence in Wu, he spent 15 years planning and ultimately led the conquest of Chu. Afterward, he exhumed the deceased Chu king and whipped his body 300 times. While this might seem extreme, in China Wu Zishu is revered with the saying, "A gentleman's revenge, though 10 years in the making, is never too late." Another revered figure from China's historical texts, the records of the grand historian, is Jing Qi of the state of Yan. He is remembered for his relentless quest for revenge. After the ruler he served was killed, Jing Qi dedicated his life to avenging him. First, he smeared his face with ink made from the lacquer tree to disguise himself. Naturally, due to the toxicity of the lacquer tree, his face turned black and decayed, leaving it severely disfigured. Furthermore, he swallowed hot charcoal to alter his voice and ensure his nemesis wouldn't recognize him. Was all this necessary, even for revenge? Jing Qi remains an epitome of loyalty and vengeance in Chinese history. The chilling part of Chinese revenge tales is that, as shown, they are pursued relentlessly, no matter how much time it takes. There are two surnames in China that are traditionally never united in marriage: Yue and Qin. This dates back almost 1,000 years when the famous general Yue Fei of the Song dynasty was killed due to a plot by Minister Qin Hui. Even now, after such a long time, people with the surname Yue avoid not only marriage but even mere association with those surnamed Qin. The grudges and desires for revenge among the Chinese can be more persistent and long-lasting than one might imagine. The old Chinese proverb, "One is not a nobleman if he doesn't take revenge when wronged," still holds true today. Reports of personal revenge are not uncommon in Chinese news. In 2000, a son spent 17 years searching throughout China to find and settle scores with the man who killed his father. In 2014, a woman in her 50s was arrested for commissioning a murder as revenge for an insult she received decades earlier. In 2019, a young man in Luoyang, Henan province, was sentenced to life in prison for murdering 4 members of a family as revenge for his father's death 23 years earlier. One of China's significant social issues is indifference. It's not uncommon for people to ignore an elderly person, collapsing in the street, or a lost child. There are even cases where violent attacks or hit-and-run incidents are witnessed, but no one reports them to the police. One of the reasons for this indifference is the fear of terrible retribution. Advertisements offering revenge services occasionally pop up on streets, indicating how deeply embedded the culture of revenge is in China. This penchant for revenge among the Chinese is also evident in the nation's foreign relations. China canceled an order of 150 airplanes just because France met with the Tibetan leader, the Dalai Lama. Norway faced a salmon export ban for awarding a Nobel Peace Prize to a dissident. Japan was refused rare earth mineral imports over the Senkaku Islands dispute. The Philippines' banana exports were blocked due to a territorial dispute in the South China Sea. Canada experienced a canola oil export ban due to regulatory issues with a Chinese company. Meanwhile, Australia faced a sudden and full halt on coal exports after clashing with China over the origins of the pandemic. China's leadership is well aware that its penchant for retaliating over even minor slights can harm the country in the long run. A dilemma faces the Chinese Communist Party. If they don't respond tit for tat, They risk being seen as weak and compromising, which could potentially erode their public support. But how did this exceptional spirit of revenge among the Chinese come to be, especially given the saying, "Revenge runs in the blood of the Chinese"? The root of this sentiment lies in Confucianism. This might seem counterintuitive, since Confucian teachings emphasize respecting and being kind to others. However, an anecdote from the Analects of Confucius, a foundational text of Confucianism, illustrates the beginning of this perspective. Someone once asked Confucius about the saying by Laozi, "Repay enmity with kindness." In emphasizing social ethics, Confucius responded by posing a question: if we repay enmity with kindness, then how do we repay kindness? He then stated, "Repay kindness with kindness and enmity with justice." The crux here is defining what justice means. While some interpretations suggest that it doesn't necessarily mean a tit-for-tat response like an eye for an eye. Over time, many have taken it to mean revenge. This interpretation is reinforced by multiple passages hinting at revenge in subsequent Confucian texts. For instance, the Book of Rites, a primary Confucian scripture, contains the sentiment that one cannot live under the same sky as the enemy of one's father and must seek revenge even if it leads to death. A commentary on another core text, the Spring and Autumn Annals, goes a step further, stating, if one doesn't seek revenge for a murdered sovereign, they cannot be deemed a subject. If one doesn't avenge a slain father, they cannot be considered a son. With Confucianism becoming the dominant ideology in China, societal norms began to scorn those who didn't seek revenge, viewing them as cowards. This was influenced by the teachings in Confucian scriptures. Over time, the scope of revenge expanded from sovereigns and fathers to encompass family, relatives, and even friends. Additionally, China experienced frequent wars and endured the fragmentation of dynasties over its long history. During these turbulent times, when legal protections were often absent, individuals and groups viewed brutal acts of revenge not only as a way to protect themselves, but also as the only means to address their grievances. Given China's vast territory, even during unified dynastic eras, many regions relied more on force than law due to limited administrative reach. Buddhism also played a role in shaping this mindset. While the original teachings of Buddhism emphasize, do not kill and show mercy even to your enemies, the Chinese merged the Buddhist concepts of reincarnation and karmic retribution with revenge. This made revenge a more relentless endeavor, suggesting that it should continue across lifetimes until successfully achieved. While personal vendettas posed challenges to the established order of unified dynasties, revenge was intertwined with the essential Confucian virtues of filial piety and loyalty. As a result, revenge wasn't treated the same as other crimes. There was an implicit agreement among the ruling elite that such acts of retribution were different. Thus, even if someone carried out a particularly brutal act of revenge, they often received leniency or at least understanding. This tolerance further entrenched the culture of revenge in China.